Indaba, My Children, by Credo Mutwa, Part 1. Prologue. These are the stories that old men and old women tell to boys and girls seated with open mouths around the spark-wreathed fires in the centers of the villages, in the dark forests, and on the aloe-scented plains of Africa. Under the gaze of the laughing stars, the old one sits, his karos wrapped around his age-blasted shoulder, staring with rheumy eyes at the semicircle of eager, expectant faces before him. Faces of those who have taken but a few steps along the dark and uncertain footpath called life. Faces of the ones yet oblivious to the pain of life's bitter scourges. Faces as yet unmarked by furrows of bitterness, ill health, and anger, the fresh, pure, open faces of children. The fire dances in the middle of the round clay fireplace like a virgin reveling in the simple joy of being alive. It devours the dry twigs and logs that a little girl is constantly feeding it, leaving only glowing ashes. It mocks the silent sky with a redly luminous column of smoke against its starry face, and by sending up short-lived stars of its own. Suddenly, the old one feels a great burden on his shoulders, a heavy responsibility toward the young one sitting so expectantly around him. Suddenly, there is a visible sag to his thin, aged shoulders. He sighs, a harsh, rasping sound, and clears his throat, spitting and blowing his nose into the fire, as his father and his father's father did before him. And he begins the story, the old, old story, which he knows he must repeat exactly as he heard it so long ago, without changing, adding, or subtracting a single word. Indaba, my children, it is through these stories that we are able to reconstruct the past of the Bantu of Africa. It is through these stories that intertribal friendship or hatred was kept alive and burning, that the young were told who their ancestors were, who their enemies were, and who their friends were. In short, it is these stories that shaped Africa as we know it, years and years ago. True, the black man of Africa had no mighty scrolls on which to write the history of his land. True, the black tribes of Africa had no pyramids on which to carve the history of each and every crowned thief and tyrant who ruled them, on which to carve the history of every battle lost and won. But this they did and still do. There are men and women, preferably with black birthmarks on either of the palms of their hands, with good memories and a great capacity to remember words and to repeat them exactly as they had heard them spoken. These people were told the history of the tribes, under oath never to alter, add, or subtract any word. Anyone who so much as thought of changing any of the stories of his tribe that he had been told fell immediately under a high curse, which covered him, his children, and his children's children. These tribal storytellers were called guardians of the Umlando, or tribal history, and I, Vusamazulu the outcast, am proud to be one of these. And here I shall tell these stories to you in the very words of the guardians who told them to me. Indaba, my children. Introduction. Many strange things have happened in Africa, things that have puzzled, disgusted, and shocked the world, especially in recent years, things for which the world has had little or no explanation, and things that can best be explained by first laying bare to the rest of humanity the strange workings of the mind of the African. Many will find it hard to believe much of what I have revealed in this book, but I am not in the least concerned, because whether I am believed or not, everything I write here is true. Much of what I shall reveal here will shock and anger many people, most of all my fellow Bantu, who resent having their doings and secrets exposed to foreigners. By writing many of these things, I am becoming, in terms of our tribal laws, a traitor to my own race, and this is going to make me hold back much of what I should also reveal. Terrible as the stigma of traitor is, I shall risk bearing it in the belief that what I am doing here will help my people in the end. Only time will tell whether I am right or wrong. There has been much suffering and bloodshed in Africa in recent years, bloodshed that has led to hatred and still more suffering. And the most pathetic thing about it is that much of this could have been prevented had the white rulers of Africa had a better knowledge and a better understanding of the way a black man's mind works than they do, even now. Kenya's Mau Mau uprising, Angola's rebellion, the massacres in the Congo, riots and killings in South Africa, all soon to be written in blood permanently on the highway of human history, all soon to be written in bleached bones on the desert of time. All were started by one thing: the total lack of understanding between black and white, the utter failure of one race of human beings to understand what goes on in the minds of the other race. The saddest thing is that the misunderstanding is mostly on one side, the more powerful side, the white man's side. If any black man with a little knowledge of English, French, or Portuguese wants to study the white man, as I have done, all he has to do is to go into the nearest town and become a regular customer of one of the second-hand bookshops there. He must buy and read at least 20 different kinds of books and magazines a month for a period of no less than 10 years. He must read classics, philosophical works, and even cheap murder mysteries and science fiction. He must read the newspapers with great care. Gradually, as the years pass, he will gain more or less a clear understanding of the white man, his way of life, his hopes, and his ambitions. But few white people have ever bothered to study the African people carefully, and by this, I do not mean driving around the African villages taking photographs of dancing tribesmen and women, asking a few questions, and then going back and writing a book, a useless book full of errors, wrong impressions, and just plain nonsense. Many of the books written by Europeans about Africans should be relegated to the dustbin. There are doctors, missionaries, and scientists who have spent years and years among Africans. Many of them even speak the local language better than the indigenous people, but what they know about them as human beings amounts to nothing. Many have studied the African in order to find justification for the policies of the ruling group they work for and support. I once heard a well-known and respected white intellectual state that when Zulus perform a war dance before going into battle, they are dancing themselves into a frenzy of rage and showing what they are going to do to their enemies on the battlefield. This statement, logical though it may sound, is as far from the truth as the day star is from the worm crawling on a rotten pumpkin. Another fallacy dear to many people, both overseas and in South Africa, is that Africans practice polygamy as a sign of wealth and prestige. And if that is so, then I, Fusimezulu Mutwa, am the favorite wife of the first High Chief of Ashanti. Ask any anthropologist in South Africa who was the greatest Zulu king, and he will reply instantly, Tishaka, of course. That is not so. Tishaka or Shaka was not the great chief white historians make him out to be. Thus, you see what I am trying to achieve with this book: simply to lay the foundation for better understanding between two different types of human beings by destroying wrong notions and false facts, and exposing much of what must be known at the risk of censure by both black and white people. There is a saying dear to lawyers that justice cannot be founded on lies, and I think the same is true with human association and mutual trust and understanding. A marriage of persons who fear and distrust each other cannot long survive, nor can one where the partners hold false ideas about each other. The same is true between races in any country. There can be no real understanding between them so long as neither has a clear picture of the other, what it really thinks, believes in, hopes for, and why. You cannot found friendship on faulty guesswork, because guessing breeds suspicion, hate, and bloodshed. And there is much that is guesswork between black and white. Many of the so-called problems facing Africa today can be traced back to foolish acts on the part of one or other of the two races in the past, acts that were the result of lack of understanding. Only by being presented with a full, clear, and unvarnished picture of the African seen from his worst, as well as his best side, can the white man hope to avoid repeating the incredible mistakes he made in the past. Blunders that have cost Africa a lot of suffering and close to 3 million human lives in the short space of 10 years. Why? So great is the lack of understanding between white and black that there are Africans, hundreds of them, who still believe, in this jet and Sputnik age, that white people never mate as common human beings do, that white women do not bear their children in the painful way black mamanas bear their pickaninnies, but that they lay shining glass eggs that hatch out little biwanas a day after being laid. Surprising? Maybe, but it is true. Thousands of black people in Rhodesia and Portuguese East Africa attribute godlike and terrible powers to whites. They believe that white people are the sons of some great living flower that grows somewhere under the restless, cold, passionless seas, and that blonde Europeans are half human and half plant, because, they argue, whoever saw yellow hair on a human head, yellow hair like that which one sees on the head of a mealy cob. So great is the lack of understanding between black and white in Africa that there are white men who refuse to accept the fact that a black man is a human being like the Indian, the colored, the Chinese, and the European himself. They would rather die than accept the fact that there are black artists, sculptors, builders, teachers, and the like. These people believe nothing else about Africans, but that they are lazy, stupid, stubborn creatures, something between an ape and a human being. In my travels through South Africa and beyond, I have met hundreds of such white men and women. Hence this book. You cannot fight an evil disease with sweet medicine, is the saying popular amongst us witch doctors, and one cannot hope to cure a putrid malady like interracial hatred and misunderstanding by mincing words. So I warn readers that they are in for a nasty shock. This is not a book for people who prefer hypocrisy to fact. In this book, the love of life of many African tribes will be openly and frankly discussed, as will their religious beliefs, their crafts, and so forth. In later chapters, you will read about the African peoples of the present time, their strange and varied reactions to civilization, and also what they think about events in Africa today. You will read about many things that have been deliberately withheld from the world, things that are common knowledge to all African people within the shores of this continent. In offering this information to the world, I do not claim it to be the last word, the book to end all books. I intend this book to be the forerunner of many more to come, and one to pave the way for other African writers, some of whom may have amassed much more knowledge of our fatherlands in the course of their lives than I have done. As I also said at the outset, the second most important purpose of this book is to shatter many fallacies that have become accepted as facts through the years, for the simple reason that nobody has ever questioned their accuracy or dared give the other side of the story. As, for instance, the facts in the killing of the white Voortrekker, Piet Retief, by Zulu King Dingana, which I shall disclose in a subsequent chapter. In order to best understand this book, the reader should be given a glimpse into the life of the author. I am a native of South Africa, a Zulu from the province of Natal. My father is a former Catholic catechist from the turbulent district of Mbo in the south of Natal. My mother, Nomabunu, is the daughter of Zico Shezi, an Induna and veteran of the Battle of Ulundi, which ended the Zulu War. He was also a confirmed high witch doctor and a custodian of the relics of our tribe and guardian of our tribe's history. Because my mother, a heathen, refused to be converted to Christianity, my parents parted just after I was born. I grew up under the protection of my grandfather and was initiated as his attendant who carried his medicine bags for him, thus sharing some of his forbidden secrets. In 1928, my father came and asked permission from my grandfather to take me away, and because of my being an illegitimate child, and therefore a disgrace to Zico's family, my grandfather Zico himself agreed, despite my mother's protests. My father and stepmother, their 3 children, and I came to the Transvaal in the middle of the same year. We lived on a farm beyond Potchefstroom, my father being a laborer there, and it was here in 1932 that my stepbrother Emmanuel died after being whipped by the farmer, my father's employer, under circumstances which are best left undisclosed. For the next 20 years, we lived on different farms, and then lastly at the mine where my father still works today as a carpenter. This mine is in the southern suburbs of Johannesburg. In 1954, I found myself employment in one of Johannesburg's leading curio shops, a shop specializing in African art. Except for 6 months when I was working in a pottery firm, I have been employed there ever since. Being an amateur artist of sorts, I have traveled quite widely in the country of my birth, first with Catholic priests in 1946 and 1948, and then with my present employer in 1958. On returning from Rhodesia that year, I visited my mother and grandfather in Zululand after more than 30 years, and at their command, I renounced Christianity and underwent the ceremony of purification in order to begin training as a witch doctor and also in preparation for assuming the post of custodian of our sacred tribal relics in the event of my grandfather's death. I have now completed my training as a medicine man and have gained a lot of knowledge that I shall lay out in this book. In March 1960, a young Basuto woman whom I loved and hoped to wed in place of my present faithless spouse was among those who died when police fired on the crowd at Sharpeville, near Vareniging. On the night before she was to be buried, her parents, her brother and two sisters, and three of their children cut off tufts of their hair and threw them into her still open coffin, swearing to avenge her if it took them 1,000,000 years, even if they should die doing so. I took what is called a chief's great blood oath, cutting a vein in my hand, the left one, and letting 10 drops of blood flow into one of the gaping bullet wounds that defiled her dark brown slender body, swearing to tell the world the truth about the Bantu people, and so save many of my countrymen the agony of the bereavement we felt. I swore to do this, come imprisonment, torture, or death, and even if the very fires of hell or the cold of eternal darkness stood in my way. This book is only the beginning of the fulfillment of my oath, an oath whose keeping has become the only purpose of my intolerable life, and which will still be binding on my children and their children's children. So, even if this is destroyed, I shall write other works like it until one of them does get published, be it after my death. Book 1. The bud slowly opens. This I choose. Oh, give me not the strident demon wail of penny whistle and tea-chest guitar, nor give me tales of those who rode the trail deep in the west of far America. Oh, not for me the songs and nonsense tales that thrill the modern rabble rout, who, leaving far behind their tribal veils, with traitor zest, ape culture from without, rather than the modern crooner's foreign voice, or the loud howls of modern township jive. I shall leave far behind that maddening noise, and hurry home where tribal elders laugh. There, neath baobabs or flat-topped mungo trees, where nestling birds with many tongues argue, and flaming aloes bless the smiling breeze with heady scent, and where the distant view of scowling mountains against the silver sky, with dread and reverence fill the misted eye, where, on the gentle slopes of ancient hills, there browse the bearded goats, the sheep, the shambling cows, and loud above his lowing wives the bull, with awful bellow, dares the distant foe. There I shall sit before Yubabankulu, who shall relate to me the tales of yore. There I shall kneel before the old Jegaloo, and hear legends of those that lived before. There I shall live in spirit once again, in those great days now gone forevermore, and see again upon the timeless plain the massed impi of so long ago. The words of men long dead shall reach my soul from the dark depths of all-consuming time, which, like a muti, shall inflame my whole and guide my life's canoe to shore sublime. Clear with the soul's time-penetrating eye, I shall see great empires rise, flourish, and die. I shall see deeds of courage or of shame, now carved forever on the drum of fame. With Shaka's legions I shall march again, a puppet knowing neither joy nor fear, which, trained to kill, heeds neither wound nor pain, and knows no other love save for its spear. I shall feel once again the searing heat of love in hearts that have long ceased to pulse, and with Mukanda shall captain the fleet of war canoes and storm Zima Mbe's walls. Here, In these stories, still told by the old, I feel the soul and heartbeat of my race, which I cannot in tales by strangers told. For these, within my heart, I have no place. The tree grows well and strong, O children mine, that have its roots deep in the native earth. So honor always thy ancestral line and traditions of thy land of birth, the sacred story of the tree of life, the self-created. No stars were there, no sun, neither moon nor earth. Nothing existed but darkness itself, a darkness everywhere. Nothing existed but nothingness, a nothingness neither hot nor cold, dead nor alive, a nothingness far worse than nothing, and frightening in its utter nothingness. For how long this nothingness lasted, no one will ever know, and why there was nothing but nothing is something we must never try to learn. Nothingness had been floating, for no one knows how long, upon the invisible waters of time, that mighty river with neither source nor mouth, which was, which is, and ever shall be. Then one day, or is it right to say one day, the river time desired nothingness, like a flesh and blood male beast desires his female partner. And as a result of this strangest mating of time and nothingness, a most tiny, nigh invisible spark of living fire was born. This tiny, so tiny spark of fire could think, and grew conscious of its lonely state. No one nor nothing could hear its cries. In the lonely depths of utter nothingness, like a forlorn babe, lost and in despair, in a cold dark forest, I exist, I am what I am, was the living thought that pulsed through the mind of the tiny spark as it wildly flew through the dark, trying to flee from where there was no escape, trying to evade the lifeless, empty, dark, and utter nothingness. It was like a tiny firefly lost in a dark cave neath a berg, from where it could never escape. I must either grow or end my life, thought the spark at long, long last. If nothingness wishes to engulf me in my present size and state, then I must increase my size till I equal that of nothingness. There was nothing for the spark to feed upon and grow, so it fed upon itself and grew in size until at last its mother, nothingness, became aware of its unwelcome presence and decided to destroy it. Nothingness at first had tried to smother it in darkness, which is the enemy of light, but the spark resisted brighter and became yet brighter. Then nothingness cast a spell of cold upon the spark, cold a deadly foe of heat, but this induced the spark to grow, only hotter and yet more hot. The living spark did grow and grew until at last it equaled nothingness in size, and to sustain itself proceed with growth. It devoured its mother, nothingness, and digested her with the most awful flash of light that anyone or anything had ever had chance to see. I am what I am, it boasted. But River Time was very cross with what the spark had done, and quickly sent the spirit cold to fight the spark outright. A mighty battle soon ensued, in which the spark, now a universal roaring flame, which filled the sky with many soaring tongues, tried to melt cold spirit and devour it complete, while cold, its icy spirit, blew its cold wet breath into the flame, but it only turned a portion of the flame into cold white ash. And this ferocious battle, which started so long ago, today still rages unabating and shall yet proceed, till time shall cease to flow. And the wise men of the tribes relate that if the flame one day shall win, all that exists shall perish in one consuming fire, while if victory goes to the spirit of cold, all living things shall freeze to death. May the Great Spirit, who is Lord Almighty and paramount chief of all, grant that neither flame nor cold shall ever win the war, because whosoever beats the other, the sun, the moon, the earth, and stars, and all that live shall cease to be. May both antagonists fight forth for everlasting time, because on their unceasing conflict, all life depends, from the still warm ashes wounds in flames existence, inflicted in battle by the spirit of cold, there arose the great Mother Ma, the very first goddess of human shape. The all-knowing, omniscient, most merciful goddess Ma had created herself by the great spirit's wish, who, displeased with the wasteful and senseless war between the flame and the cold, had come from far beyond the 10 gates of eternity to bring order to the universe. Now Ma, the great mother, began to execute commands of you it shall relate anon, from whence the moon, although immortal, the great mother was cursed with strange desires and feelings, which afterward she passed to man and beast alike. These feelings, strange to immortals, like anger, hunger, jealousy, and misery, or love and lust and craving for luscious food. With such desires, the great Mother Ma was cursed, and they were like diseases within her being. And because of this, the storytellers, the wise men of the tribes, depict her as the imperfect, undying one. That is why wood carvers throughout this continent always make their carvings of her imperfect. Either a leg is shown deformed, or one breast much bigger than the other, hands of unequal size. It is from the great Mother Ma that we mortal souls and our brothers, the beasts, inherited all our faults. Imperfect seed brings forth imperfect plants. When the great Mother Ma had finished creating the stars, the sun, and the earth, she seated herself on the mountain of iron, Taba Zimbai, to rest and await the Great Spirit's further instructions. It was while she thus was sitting that a strange feeling came over her, a feeling she could not interpret, but loneliness now we know it had been, and she wept most bitterly. So long and so loud did the goddess cry that the very stars trembled and fell from the sky, while the tears that the goddess shed flowed across the land in all directions, forming murmuring streams and the mighty rivers we see today. At last, the Great Spirit commanded the goddess to end her queer emotional display and to repair the damage done to earth by falling stars and floods of tears, and then continue with creating a perfect universe from chaos. No, cried Ma through her flood of tears, far greater than that of Musiwa Tunya, the falls that tumble in the river Zambezi. No, never. I shall not move from where I am until I have a companion to work with. Is it not clear that I'm utterly lonely? Who can I talk to in my lonely hours? These barren plains, these silent, craggy mountains, those stupid stars that twinkle foolishly at me. Where, oh where, is the sense in ordering me to create these useless things anyway? Those stars, the sun, and this miserable bowl called Earth. Who am I? And how long will I work here, creating all this utterly senseless rubbish? From far beyond eternity's borders, where no god or goddess or demon can ever go, came the Great Spirit's cold and hollow, unemotional voice. It howled like a tempest through the star-spangled skies, like thunder upon the plains, re-echoing through the valleys and gorges, and shaking the great barren crags. Like trees in a gale, bolt after bolt of crashing lightning tore across the shrieking skies. Howling cyclones swept the rocky plains, while mighty earthquakes sent the mountains roaring to level with the ground, while plains were upwards heaved to form new mountain ranges. The shattered world, not yet defiled by human beings, by grass and trees and beasts, was cringing and shuddering before the awe-inspiring voice of the highest of the very high. Being most imperfect, listen to the voice of thy Lord and Master. I beseech thee to create, and my commands are not for thee to question. Thy duty it is to do, and not to doubt. Thy duty it is to obey without a murmur. Thou shalt do what I commanded thee to do, whether thou seest the reason or not. The purpose behind the creation of all the universe is known to me alone, and with me it shall rest a secret till the end of time. Proceed to create as I commanded, without delay. The goddess rose and stood on the summit of Mount Taba Zimbai, the eternal iron mountain. She stood erect, a pillar of incredible beauty, such as no mortal has ever or will ever see. Her golden, glittering eyes pierced the dark of the starry sky and peered into the remotest reaches of infinity, where, far oh, so far away, she could vaguely discern the blaze of light, the formless, ageless, immortal Umkilinkulu, the highest of the high. Slowly Ma raised her luminous hands to the heavens. The sorrow and pity she felt over her great loneliness, evaporating to the seven winds, and opening her silvery lips, she spoke. Thou hast spoken, O great spirit, and I have heard. As a tool and a toy in thy hand, I shall obey forthwith thy every command for better or worse. A dreadful silence fell upon the earth, and the troubled heavens were stilled, while the sea, which had been devouring, with its waves vast areas of land, retreated to the coast, shamefully, like a boy, caught in an act of naughtiness. For the first time in its existence, the universe had heard the voice of the great, the supremely high, as the great red sun went to rest beyond the jagged mountains, and the drifting clouds caught his fiery light on their bellies. The first goddess heard his voice once again. O imperfect being, your wish for a partner shall soon be granted. The silvery goddess's golden, luminous eyes lit with a glow of joy so intense that only a goddess can feel and still live, while roaring liquid fire flowing through her crystal veins grew hotter and roared through her quivering body with greater, far greater, fury than that of the waters that thunder over Kabirabasa rapids. Her chest, so heavily laden with four immense breasts, each with a sharp, pointed nipple of emerald green, heaved as she let out a gusty sigh of heartfelt relief. The heat of her breath, which could vaporize elephants, left her dilated nostrils and wide open mouth, in three shimmering jets, which merged in a cloud of red-hot, searing luminescence. Great Master, asked she, what manner of companion wilt thou send me? You are what in future shall be known as a female, and your opposite shall be your companion, a male. A male? Asked the goddess, bathing in pools of intense, invisible joy. What shall this, O my master, this male, be like in appearance? Will it share my beauty with me? Verily, thundered the Almighty Spirit, across the boundless reaches of infinity. In my presence, nothing is ugly, nothing beautiful. And Kulinkulu, the Great Spirit, from the sparks that flame shot out, she created the stars, the sun, and the body on which we stand. Great One, insisted Ma, her curiosity smothering her being completely. Surely your child has the right to know more about the companion you hold as a prospect for her. Of what use will he be to me? He shall bring contentment to you, and both you and he will bring forth life upon the earth. But what will he look like? The over-curious goddess insisted. Will he be something as lovely as I? To which the Great Spirit made no reply. What will he look like? Insisted Ma. How shall I recognize him? He will be conscious, though unlike yourself. More I refuse to disclose. The goddess retired forthwith to her sanctuary under the hill, to rest a while, but not sleep, for gods and goddesses never sleep. Her mind was full of lovely dreams of her future companion male and what contentment he will bring to her. But above all, she wished that he'd be a being as beautiful as herself. In spite of the difference foretold, she patiently waited with burning flames of desire. And as the night wore on, the goddess, who ate particular kinds of a metal for food, felt hungry indeed, and leaving her cave, searched through the plains for her favorite dish. The first thing she found was, however, a piece of tasteless, unpalatable granite which she spat in a donga disgruntledly. She continued to search, and her appetite finally stilled. She returned to impatiently await the dawn. Then, when the first rays of light burst over the many-fanged range to the east, and the mountains cast sharp shadows over the plains, the goddess heard an awful voice calling out hoarsely at her. Come, O my mate, I await thee here. And the shimmering silvery goddess arose with a cry of immeasurable joy. And not heeding the regular exit, she burst through the side of the hill, and amidst roaring boulders, thundering clouds of blinding dust, she held her arms outstretched. My mate, you have. Her voice faded out into gasping silence as hungry limbs reached out with might from the billowing dust for her lithe silvery form. And oh great spirit, how horrible they were. They were not arms like her own, but those of great creeping vines, whose very bark studded with jagged pieces of granite and diamonds and iron ore, a horrible mineral display. These branches, as they'll henceforth be called, sprang with the host of others from the top of a monstrous trunk, resembling the biggest baobab tree that ever grew on earth. From the middle of the monstrous trunk bulged dozens of bloodshot eyes, which burnt with a lecherous hunger, while beneath them grinned a wicked mouth with 1,000 pointed fangs, now and then a long green tongue, like the height of a crocodile, would lick the granite lips. From some of the tree's branches grew great udders which oozed a golden honey like fluid. Unlike the ordinary tree, this one had roots which it used, like a crab or a spider, to move from one place to another. And the sight alone of those crawling living roots, scrabbling over the rock-hard plain as they moved, was enough for the mountains to shudder. Come, my beloved, come to me, roared the tree, and drew the goddess close, and with its rock-studded mouth bruised her silvery lips with a savage kiss. I am the tree of life, thy mate, and I desire thee. Awi, shrieked Ma, it cannot be. My mate, you are not my companion, no. Release me, you ugly, most monstrous thing. Release you, while I've just caught you. You, my heart's desire. I did not catch you only to release you. What? Gasped the goddess, as more and more branches held her fast beyond all hope. And here, my dear readers, I shall, as the saying goes, cut the fowl's beak, leaving the rest to your most respected imagination. Suffice it to say that in agonized moments that followed, the goddess had very good cause to regret her folly of requesting the Almighty Spirit to grant her a wish of her own. When the tree of life released her at last, the thoroughly frightened Ma fled madly across the plains with loud shrieks to the Great Spirit with entreaties to rid her of a most unpleasant mate. But the reply that the first goddess got was, "You have had your wish, what more do you want?" You may wonder, dear reader, how the goddess managed her escape. Well, the tree had pursued her relentlessly with all its tremendous bulk. Like any young man, he had no wish to see even his metaphysical bride escape and return to his mother-in-law. Do not the wise ones say that they who have for the first time tasted the nectar-filled cup of love never let it drop undrained? So, over plain and valley, and over the hills, and down many a cruel mountainside, fled the terrified goddess, and racing forth, now on the ground on her silvery feet, now through the air like a bird of prey. But no matter how far and how fast she fled, the tree of life kept close on her heels, until at last both pursuer and pursued reached the bleak, barren wastelands which in future years became known to mortals as Kalahari. By now the great tree was on fire with love, but tired nevertheless, while his quarry, urged by the cold breath of fear, was still as fresh as ever. At long last, after many years of flight and pursuit, both goddess and tree plunged headlong into the water of Lake Makarakari, and it was here that Ma streaked through the water like some silvery luminous fish, and then soared like an owl through the night sky, while below, her mate, the tree of life, waddled in the mud of the lake. Here it was that the imperfect immortal very nearly made good her escape, but here too a flash of pure inspiration tore through the sluggish brain of the tree. Acting fast on a chance idea, it scooped a mighty mound of rock and clay and sand from the bottom of the lake, and he rolled it into a mighty ball, greater in size than Kilimanjaro itself. Then, in one lightning movement of all his branches combined, he hurled this formidable missile skyward at the object of his love, now almost one with the stars. Straight and true went the soaring ball, and the next thing the fugitive goddess felt was a great blow on the back of her silvery head. And as she plunged through the air, limp and unconscious, but still of unearthly beauty, the great ugly tree spread its manifold arms to save her in her headlong fall. My dearest beloved, he gurgled. The great ball rebounded from the goddess's head and went into orbit as the moon of today. And the great spirit in his almighty wisdom, with radiance declared it the guardian of love, to regulate the love of gods, and of men and beasts and birds and fishes yet to come. Today, all the tribes of this dark continent respect the power of the holy missile and its influence upon all our lives in love. Drums still beat, and most secret rituals are performed in dark forests in honor of that missile, which helped to restore the very first marriage between our goddess Ma and our most sacred tree, the tree of life. Even today, as in ages past, the moon makes lovers seek each other's arms, and wives the company of their children's fathers. Aoi, great is the power of the moon, and who dares to doubt it? Lo, thus sing the holy singers of Kariba, whenever the full moon rises and turns the timeless Zambezi into a dazzling serpent of shimmering liquid silver and gold. O missile which through the starry sky, at fleeting Ma the tree of life let fly, shed still on earth thy heedless silver light, and let all things feel love's consuming might. Shoot burning darts into the lion's soul, make him forget to stalk the zebra foal, and turn him back to where, beneath the trees, his mate awaits, and there to find release from unpleasant anguish. Bid the warring king forget a while his bloody lance and cling to his beloved of the pointed breast. Command the north, the south, the east, and the west to pause from war and thieving and to love. Behold, the first is born. After her capture, the tree of life held the goddess fast, never to let her escape again. And it came about one day that movement occurred within her, movements which increased with the passage of time, much to her fear and distress. At long last, after 1,000 years, the goddess felt a sudden tearing pain that prompted her to cry out suddenly and writhe in anguish in her mineral husband's tentacles. The first cruel pains were followed by others, a third and fourth, and the glittering voice of the goddess rang loudly across the plains to rebound against the stunned distant mountains. The foolish tree of life, not understanding, thought his bride was trying another escape, so he held her more tightly in his manifold arms, greatly increasing her pain. As time went on, the intensity of her suffering increased twofold, and after 50 agonizing years, turned so utterly unbearable that she freed herself from the tree of life's endearing embrace and wriggled and rolled on the barren earth in effort to ease her inexplicable agony. Such was her suffering and desperate her efforts that with self-hypnosis she counted the stars. Even today, many tribes have the saying, to count the very stars in pain. The first father, the tree of life, kept watch with typical helplessness as his mate writhed and wailed through her birth pains. But at long, long last the goddess was relieved from her hideous pain, and the first mighty nation of flesh and blood. A countless number of human beings were born, and in their multitudes they spread to populate the barren Kalahari. Meanwhile, however, the strangest change came over the tree of life. Green buds burst from its writhing limbs, and clouds of seeds emerged and fell upon the rocky plains. Wherever they struck the ground, they shot out roots into the stubborn rock and barren sand, breaking through to reach some moisture. And soon all manner of plants grew forth, a creeping carpet of lush living grass. Soon mighty forests covered the earth, contending with the mountains themselves. Howling winds and sheets of rain and roots of forest trees worked hand in hand to mold the craggy mountains into undulating plains. Soon after all this effort, the tree of life bore living, snarling, howling animal fruit. From its widespread branches, they fell with a thud on the grassy ground below and scampered off into the forest in their countless millions. From great cracks in the trunk of the tree, birds of all kinds came flying and waddling forth, filling the air with all their love calls. Ostriches and ibises, eagles, hawks, and flamingos, the kinds we know and those we've never seen, like the two-headed talking Cayulo birds. These we know from legend alone, and I'll relate about them anon. The earth, which had hitherto been lifeless and dead, began to live, and sounds of all kinds resounded from the forests and valleys. As beast fought beast, beast called beast, and birds sang their happiness loudly towards the smiling sun. Many, many kinds of beasts that the tree of life brought forth, since vanished forever from the face of the earth, because Ifa, the spirit of total extinction, has long since consumed them all. And the kinds of animals we see today, however many they are but the pitiful scraps that survived. Legends tell of three kinds of lions, of which only one survived. From the roots of the tree of life came reptiles of all kinds and shapes, and cloud after cloud of all sorts of insects hummed upwards in continuous streams. The song of life had begun on earth, the song which is still being sung, but which one day may trail off into oblivion, leaving at most the faintest echo. History's sun had risen and still shines today, but it will no doubt set one day forever. The race that died, the holy ones of Kariba Gorge, tell us that the first men to walk the earth were all of a similar kind. They looked exactly alike and were all of similar height, and their color was red like African's plains. In those days, there were no black-skinned or dark brown men, no pygmies and bushmen, nor Hottentots either. The wise ones of the Bakongo agree with the holy ones of Kariba Gorge, and they even go as far as to say that the first people had no hair on their bodies at all. All had golden eyes of Ma, the goddess who launched them on earth with such pain. All the wise ones and holy ones of this dark continent agreed that the splitting of all humanity into races, the Tolwa Tutsi, the Pygmies, or the Batwa, the short yellow bushmen of Kalahari, even those long-bearded Arabi, who raided our villages mercilessly for slaves, resulted from one great accident which occurred. Through the sinfulness of these first men, inspire me, O Spirit of my fathers, give me courage to proceed and tell the world. What say the holy ones of these first men? Let me break, O demon of disobedience. Let me break the stout stockade but once of tribal secrecy. Let me relate to the world outside the forbidden story that all wise ones, all witch doctors know but keep firmly shut in the darkest tunnels of their souls. What is this forbidden legend about these first men? Tales of the Nguni, the Mambo, the Lunda, and the Bakongo, when the muted beat of the drum of sworn secrecy has sounded, and the holy ones gather to retell once again the most secret tales to the young generation, tales that must never be told to strangers and to the low-born peasant dogs. What say the holy ones of this first nation? Lo, I shall open my mouth, the mouth of a traitor most foul, who, for what he believes to be good for his people, here betrays the secrets of his land. I shall open my mouth and tell you, so gather around me, Indaba, my children. It is said that more than 1,000 times 10 years went by, in which there was peace on this virgin earth, peace in the sky, peace on the forest-veiled plains, on the scented valleys and timeless hills. Only certain beasts were permitted to kill by the laws of the Great Spirit in accordance with their victual needs. There were none of this savage and wanton destruction of life, such as men today indulge in to gratify their warped and evil souls. Man against man forged no evil spear with secret and murderous intent. There were no such things as anger and hate, and nothing of this is mine, and that is yours. No contention and rivalry. Man breathed peace on the cheek of his brother men. Man walked in peace without fear of wild beasts, which in turn had no reason to fear him. Men in those days did not suffer from our emotional curses. They knew no worry like our sin-laden selves. Death they welcomed with open arms and a smile on the face because, unlike our degenerate selves, they knew death for what it was, life's ultimate friend. But the evil star of self-righteousness was emerging from yonder horizon, and man's undoing was nigh. Once in a shady recess of a vine-screened cave, a beautiful woman whom some called Nelisi, but whom many more call K-Lacey, gave birth to the first deformed child, deformed not in flesh alone, but also in his soul. His shrunken body supported a big flat head, containing one short-sighted cyclopean eye. His arms and his legs were shrunken stiff, and were twisted like a sun-dried impala, while his mouth was completely displaced to one side. In a perpetual obscene leer, his scrawny neck was wrinkled, like a starved old vulture 2 days dead, and his round little paunch protruded neath his chest in a most revolting way. Strings of crystallized saliva drooled continuously from his sagging lips. He breathed through only one nostril, with a sickening hissing sound. The name of this very unpleasant monstrosity, tribal narrators tell today, was Zaraleli or Zaha-RL, the Wicked. This was the man, no, rather the thing, that introduced all evil to this earth. Whenever a child was born to these first men, the mother would take it straight for a blessing to the two-headed talking Cayula birds, and also to ask them to give it a name. Thus it came about that when Nelisi, let us rather abide by K-Lacey, for this is her proper and uncorrupted name, took her terrible offspring to the big old Cayula bird, which nested not far from her cave. It gave one glance at her and shuddered at what she carried in the half-dead, deformed thing that the girl held aloft. The Cayula bird could see evil so great and so utterly monstrous that if unchecked, there and then it would definitely overrun the universe outright with its bad influence, and what it saw beyond the veil of tomorrow made it screech with unrestrained horror and pain. Aid, O woman, what have you there? Destroy it, kill it, without delay. What? But this is my baby, my child, cried the mother in utter despair. But the bird's voice rang like metal and echoed over valleys and mountains. Female of the human race, I appeal to thee. Destroy thy offspring before it's too late. But where have you ever seen mothers kill babies? The poor mother pleaded, now on her knees, for sake of mankind and that of the stars, and for all those as yet unborn. I command thee, O female of thy race, destroy that thing in your arms. No baby is that which you are holding there, but naked evil, devouring and pure. A bloody future it spells for the human race. My baby evil, he is the dearest baby on earth. My loveliest baby, destroy it, not on your life. I command thee. But K-Lacey screamed. She turned and ran like a buck through the bush, her baby clutching her heaving breast. The Cayula immediately took off in pursuit, by telepathy calling others to join in the hunt for the fugitive girl. Only once she paused for a gasp of breath on the grassy slope of a hill, and on looking around she saw a black flock, hordes of the two-headed, six-winged rainbow birds. It struck her that these birds rarely flew, and only did so only when the need was great. Ailey, my baby, they seek you, but they will not get you as long as I live. And with this, she turned and sped up the hill. But as she descended the other side, the great birds were on her and diving at her, ripping with talons deep furrow on her back. She reached the dark depths of the forest anon, and the birds in their tireless pursuit uprooted trees and moved rocks and dived with a roar of air. Again and again they appealed to her, to surrender her child for humanity's sake. No, 1,000 times no, she panted and onward fled, tripping and falling and bruising her legs, only to rise and speed forth faster than ever. At long last, she found a deep hole, in which she sprang with no second thought. They fell for what seemed like 1,000 years, and struck the floor with a bone-jarring thud. For a long time, they lay there completely stunned, on the bank of an underground stream, a river which roared and crashed with great noise. Through miles of underground caverns, the evil spawn of the foolish girl did not die as he fell on his mother, and was thus due to rise soon to menace the world with the fumes of his evil soul. Soon the stars would weep in shame, while cursing the woman Kay Lacey and the wicked Zaha Arello. The otherwise beautiful woman and her monstrous son lived for years in the bowels of the earth. Fish and crabs from the muddy banks were abundant enough to keep them alive, while above ground the Caillou lovebirds were searching the forests and plains in vain. On returning from crab hunt one day, Kay Lacey saw her son sitting near the fire, humming a happy tune to himself. This greatly surprised her, for never before had he spoken a word leave humming a tune. My son, she breathed, her soul overflowing with joy. You can talk. You are singing. S-H-H-H-H-H, he said, and Kay Lacey saw him fixedly stare at some iron ore, the very piece she had brought to the cave herself, which she used on the flints in the cavern walls when she wished to kindle a fire. A cold horror struck the poor woman as her gaze came to rest on the ore. Her whole body froze with horror and fear as the penetrating stare of her son caused the ore to grow in size. Still hypnotized, she watched and saw. The ore turned soft and starting to flow. A few heartbeats later, two bright stalks grew, at the tip of which glowed small blood-red eyes, and a hungry-looking mouth took shape, snarling viciously at Kay Lacey with a display of razor-sharp teeth. The woman shrieked with horror and undiluted fear when she realized her son was in fact creating, that the tune he was humming was an incantation, commanding the hitherto lifeless iron to assume a shape and life. She watched spellbound as the living thing grew, and legs like those of a grasshopper took shape. Then came pairs of dragonfly wings, and a rat-like shining metal tail with a sting, a crystal sting with dark green poison. My son, cried she, what, and how, and why? This, he said, without emotion, is one of my weapons of conquest. Conquest? Conquest of what, my son? Of everything the earth, the sun, and the moon. Then turning to the fast-growing metal beast, and indicating his mother with a deformed limb, snapped, seize her, and drink your fill. At which command the horror leapt, and pounced upon the startled woman, seizing her with his insect-like legs. My son, what have I done? Why do you do this to me? I am the woman who bore you and brought you up. I know very well who and what you are, but nobody asked you to bear me and rear me, and least of all did I. I saved you from the big birds, my son. They desperately wanted to kill you. All that I know, said Zaha Aralo calmly. It was only the instinct of a female beast, and you were obeying a natural law. Have mercy, my son, cried Kay Lacey. What is this thing called mercy? You are of no use to me anymore. I have now grown to full independence, and I no longer need your protection. All I need now is nourishment for my new servant to grow and reproduce its kind. From the mouth of the metallic takalosh protruded a long needle structure with which it pierced her chest and heart, and as it sucked, it grew. Through the mist of her last agony, the mother of the wicked Zaha Arello saw her son's outrageous future. She saw his great evil swallow the earth and the universe itself. Too late, she appreciated her error, that after all, the birds were right. But now she could not destroy her child to save all mankind from its atrocious influence. Through eyes that were slowly glazing in death, she saw the object withdraw its cruel probe. She saw it lay some hundreds of silvery eggs at her son's express command, and they all exploded into hundreds of fast-growing winged things like itself. The last thing she saw was how a litter of four bore her son aloft in triumph. "Farewell, mother," he said as he glanced back at her, with a last contemptuous look in his eyes. They carried him forth from the lighted cave into the darker parts of the caverns, and slowly the glow from all the luminous eyes faded in darkness in the echoing distance. With a last soft sigh, Kay lay sea-dyed, alone and utterly forgotten for all time to come, in that maze of underground tunnels. The fantastic reign of the first chief on earth, that of Zaha Arello, was about to begin. Today known as Serili or Serlili, he was the deformed incarnation of naked evil and was about to burst upon the world like a glittering poisonous flower. Woe, oh woe to all mankind, woe to all those as yet unborn. Zaha Arello, the wicked, emerged from the tunnels, borne aloft by a litter of four of these metal things, while all the rest of the metal takolashes came swarming behind in a vast and glittering cloud, awaiting his word to enslave and to kill. The first that this airborne metallic army engaged in a battle of complete extermination was the holy two-headed Cayula birds. From miles away came the sacred birds, in hundreds upon thousands to stem the tide of evil in a final, most desperate endeavor. A mighty aerial battle took place that lasted more than 100 days without pause, watched in amazement by all men and all beasts. The birds inflicted a great deal of damage, tearing and ripping with talons and beaks, but the poisonous stings of these metal things caused havoc among the attackers. In their hundreds, they fell down to earth, followed to be sucked of their blood. And as fast as these metal things nourished themselves, they produced more and more of their metal kind. For each one destroyed by the holy birds, 1,000 took its place. And thus the birds were soon heavily defeated, and the remnant fled to the ends of the earth. "All is lost," cried one as it flew away in the sunset. "Woe to mankind, woe to the world." But the millions of red-skinned first people did not understand its meaning. They did not interpret it this way till many centuries later, when together with Zaha Arello, the wicked, they died in agony, they who were later to be known as the race that died. Please stay tuned for part 2, coming soon. Peace, love, and blessings to you all.